Tell me about your great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather Michael Cault. Well, you, Mark, have his watch.
Uh-huh.
It has 5 opening doors on it. It is a Vacheron Constantinople, with one of the words misspelled. Makes it a real keeper. And Vacheron went on to be the wristwatch of great renown in the 60s. President Kennedy wore a Vacheron watch, best in the world. And he came here, and the watch that he brought is dated 1834 by one of its repair marks on the inside of it. That was 1834 is about as early as you can ever find a cylinder escapement watch. One of those that tips back and forth. And that's called cylinder escape. That is the word that's misspelled, cylinder, on that watch. Look at it. And he had that watch because he was railroad, and he was helping build the railroad west. And every now and again, they had to stop building because the Civil War was going on. 1863, 64. The war is going on and raging through parts of Ohio and Indiana and whatnot. So they'd have to stop work and let the war carry on and then start work again. He got as far west as Shelbyville, Illinois. He had saved up his money, and he wanted to bring his brother over here from Ireland. The famine was awful over there. It got worse after he left. And so he took a bunch of the money and he managed to send it back to Ireland for his brother to come over. And his mother writes him later, and his mother says, "I'm sorry, but your brother doesn't have the money to come over because we used it for your father, who is very, very ill. And so you're going to have to send more money." And he did. And his brother came over. His father then did pass on. And so he got himself and his brother over here from Ireland, and he bought himself a farm just a little north of Windsor, Illinois, very close to where my grandfather lived. So my grandfather and my grandmother, who we called Mama, her name was Isabella. And a nice name, Isabella. And she is my grandmother, and she became everybody's Norman Rockwell notion of grandmother in the old days. She was portly. She was cuddly. She was a fantastic cook, and she loved her grandchildren. And she always smelled like lilac soap, even though she never had a bathroom, only an outhouse. And she lived out there on the farm, north of Windsor, about 3 miles, all of her natural life. I don't think she ever traveled anywhere. But her brother Michael, he was a handsome young man, as you can see that on the picture. And he became a schoolmaster. But when Dory got into trouble with her husband, now Dory got in trouble because the first fellow...
Just a minute, I'm going to put that on another file here.
All right.
So when did your great-grandfather pass away?
He lived to be around 65 years old. And he had traveled all the way out to Eugene, Oregon, to see his son, who had migrated to Oregon.
Right.
He then went south into Oklahoma to see his daughter over here.
Right.
And while he was at his daughter's place, he caught a cold. And it sort of developed into pneumonia.
Right.
And they didn't have the modern things in those days. And so the pneumonia went forth and took his life at about age 65.
And what year was that?
Oh gosh, that was about 1885, maybe 1900.
Yep.
And he was brought back by train to Windsor, Illinois. He's buried along with his wife
right.
in the Windsor Cemetery.
Right.
They're just at the north edge of town.
And then you knew Isabella.
I knew Isabella. Oh,
your,
yeah, yeah.
Your
yeah.
grandmother.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right. And when did she die?
She died about 1945, and she had some kinds of pulmonary problems, and the doctor prescribed for her cool cigarettes with menthol to help out her pulmonary problem. She tried a few of these cool cigarettes, and they didn't work really well for her, so she kind of gave them up.
Yep.
But one time I was down there as a young lad babysitting Uncle Orion's kids in the original farmhouse. She had these cool cigarettes sitting around, and so I lit up one to try it out. It was awful. Yep. It was bad. And so medicine has changed.
Yep.
My grandmother had a heart problem.
And you were about 13 when you lost her.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
about that.
And did you know your grandfather?
My grandfather, Cault, I did not know.
Did you know your grandfather, William Kirk?
Yes, I knew my grandfather, William Kirk.
And his name was, you called him?
We called him Pampa. We called her Mama. Pampa, thin as a rail all of his life, and she was well on the portly side.
Right.
Reminiscent of Jack Fat could eat no fat, but wife could eat no lean. And he was quite a successful farmer. Hung on to 160 acres of great farmland down there. And when Uncle Orion was kind of taking over the farm as the youngest kid down there, living there with his wife and kids, he bought in 1938 a John Deere Model A tractor to start farming with. Well, my grandfather would have nothing to do with that. So they still had the team of horses that the farm had used up until that time, and they kept the team and they kept the John Deere. My Uncle Orion went out and bought himself a big black, about a 1938 Buick. Wonderful thing with the tire on the fender, just before the running boards and whatnot. Oh, it was a slick car. I got to ride in it all the way to the State Fair in Springfield back about 1940 or so. But Pampa, he couldn't drive. He couldn't drive either the tractor or the car. So Uncle Orion undertook to teach him to drive. Now, the driveway going into the house there had just a straight driveway that went to the shop where they repaired things. And it also curved out to the side and went through the wood lot where the trees were grown for wood for the fireplace and whatnot in the wintertime. So my Uncle Orion got my grandfather in the car behind the wheel and said, now here are the things that we've all taught our kids about driving. And Pampa gets under there, and he's got the clutch in, and he's got his foot on the brake and whatnot, and he manages with help to get it into gear. And like any teenager learning to drive, he lets the clutch out a little too fast. And the car goes jump, 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 port. And he's all shocked and he's all surprised. And he said, whoa, as you would say to a team of horses. And the team of horses didn't whoa. And so he said the next command for the horses, G!
What does G mean?
Which means G means turn to the right. And the horses would not turn to the right to the lot. And he's headed straight for the garage. And he says, haw! Haw is the word for turn to the left. And that would have been into the fence. And the car didn't do that either. But Uncle Orion reached over and stomped on the brake. And the car stopped, and my grandfather never drove again.